Hello, valued viewers. I hope you're all doing very well. And a very special shout out to my Super Thanks contributor at Ohio Trucker 1. And because his contribution was $20 or more, he has chosen to do a video, and his selection was The Legend of Casey Jones and his locomotive number 392. And before we start, just a quick reminder that if you would like a video such as this done for yourself, all you have to do is hit the Super Thanks button on the taskbar next to the like button and contribute $20 or more, and the video is done first thing before any project that I have going. And of course, any contribution toward the channel's efforts is greatly appreciated as well, and will get recognized right here on the next video. And without further ado, let's get on with the video. Enjoy. You know, trains are fascinating. Since their inception during the early 19th century, people have always marveled at the technology that makes them go. As they expanded, they forced the creation of standard times so that their trains could be on time. Even today, they remain the largest overland transporter of goods, loading freight cars and intermodal containers from ships, transporting grain, automobiles, oil, hazardous chemicals, and even garbage. Well, you name it. Before the widespread use of the automobile, passenger trains carried people from New York City to San Francisco within a matter of days. And to be quite honest, when trains wreck, they are quite the sight to see. What with the mangled steel, wood from the train cars intertwined with the track and became national and international news stories. On April 30th, 1900, there was one particular train wreck that remains a subject of folk tales, songs, and stories of bravery. On a stretch of track owned by the Illinois Central Railroad, an engineer was attempting to make up for his train's delayed start leaving a station. A half-mile outside of Vaughn, Mississippi Depot, a legend was born when his train crashed, and this is the story of Casey Jones. Casey Jones had shown interest in the railroad as a young boy and endeavored to become an engineer upon adulthood. He achieved this dream working for the Illinois Central Railroad. Jones was held in high esteem by his employers and fellow railroad workers and was known to run his locomotive quickly in order to ensure that his train always arrived on time. A few of his co-workers admitted that Jones did take risk. However, he had only 9 reprimands for safety violations and had not committed any such violation in the year prior to his death. It's funny, a difference in times, because in today's world, you get that kind of reprimands, you're likely out the door. After arriving in Memphis on the evening of April 29, 1900, having just completed the run, Jones and his fireman Sim Webb received word that the conductor of the southbound passenger train, the New Orleans Special, was sick and unable to perform his duties. Because no other engineer was available to make the run to Canton, Mississippi, Jones volunteered to take the sick man's place and requested that his engine, number 382, be hooked up to the passenger cars. Jones climbed into the cab of number 382 at 12:50 a.m., and the train was more than an hour and a half behind schedule and ventured out into the foggy night. Determined to arrive on schedule, Jones ran the number 382 at high speeds, sometimes traveling over 70 miles an hour, considerably faster than the normal 35 miles an hour average. Surprisingly, Jones was able to make up much of the lost time during his high-speed run. It looked as though Jones would be able to arrive in Canton on schedule. And then a traffic jam had developed further down the line in Vaughn, just north of Canton. Jones received orders that the trains at Vaughn were to move from the main line to the siding so he could pass unimpeded. Unknown to Jones, one of the trains that he was to pass had suffered a malfunction which locked the brakes and stranded several freight cars and the caboose on the main track. He carried on barreling toward Canton. Jones rounded a blind curve just outside of the Vaughn at high speeds and was suddenly met by a caboose sitting on the track. Jones told Webb to jump, and in a desperate effort to stop the train, the engineer applied the brakes, shut the throttle, and pulled back the reverse lever. Webb jumped from the locomotive, sustaining minor injuries. Although witnesses claim Jones was able to slow the locomotive from 75 miles an hour to about 35 miles an hour, number 382 plowed through the caboose and several freight cars before derailing. According to the Memphis Commercial Appeal, Casey Jones was found lying under the cab with, well, let's just say, very mangled. However, thanks to his efforts, none of the other employees or passengers were killed or suffered serious injuries. His body was returned to Jackson and buried. The circumstances surrounding the accident remained a subject of debate for years afterwards. The Illinois Central official report stated that Jones had not heeded signals of the flagman or the warning torpedo placed on the track to warn the oncoming New Orleans Special about the stalled freight train. A warning torpedo is a device placed on top of the track that emits a loud bang when run over by a train, and that tells the engineer to stop. And I will link a video at the end of this one to my video that covers the torpedoes. And regardless of anything else that was brought to light or spoken, the Illinois Central maintained that Jones was solely responsible for the collision because he failed to acknowledge these warnings. However, Webb claimed that there was no torpedo on the track or a flagman to alert the train, which I kind of tend to believe that. All agreed, however, that Jones managed to avert a potentially disastrous crash through his exceptional skill at slowing the engine and saving the lives of all the passengers at the cost of his own. For this, he was immortalized in a traditional song called The Ballad of Casey Jones. So a little bit more about the Illinois Central report. The railroad employee known as John M. Newberry was the flagman that Casey Jones had allegedly ignored on the southbound number 83 that Jones had hit. Now, according to the report, Newberry said he had gone out a distance of 3,000 feet where he had placed warning torpedoes on the rail. He continued north a further distance of 500 to 800 feet where he stood and gave signals to Jones train number 1. Historians and the press had questions about the official findings, as do I. Now here we get some contradiction, and this is no surprise either, but in the official report, Fireman Sim Webb states that he heard the torpedo explode before going to the gangway on the engineer side and seeing the flagman with a red and white light standing alongside the tracks. Going to the fireman's side, he saw the markers of the caboose of number 83 and yelled to Jones, but it would have been impossible for him to have seen the flagman if the flagman had been positioned 500 to 800 feet before the torpedoes, as the report says he was. In any event, some railroad historians have disputed the official count over the years, finding it difficult, if not impossible, to believe that an engineer of Jones' experience would have ignored a flagman and fuses and torpedoes exploding on the rail to alert him of danger. Contrary to what the report says, shortly after the accident and until his death, Webb maintained, "We saw no flagman or fuses and heard no torpedoes. Without any warning, we plowed into that caboose." And to tell you how sketchy the official reporting has been over the years, there's even controversy about how Casey Jones died. To a degree of it debated what went through his head, his neck, was he crushed, was he scalded to death? All of those were considered, but no one could quite agree on what was the official cause of death. And Casey Jones, by the way, was the only person to die in this accident. No other fatalities occurred, and only minor injuries from everyone else involved in the accident had happened. And for at least 10 years after the wreck, the imprint of Casey Jones's engine was clearly visible in the embankment on the east side of the tracks about 2/10 of a mile north of Tucker's Creek, which is where the marker was located. The imprint of the headlight, boiler, and the spokes of the wheels could be seen, and people would ride up on handcars to view the traces of the famous wreck. Corn that was scattered by the wreck grew for years afterwards in the surrounding fields. The wreck of 382 was brought to the Walter Valley shop and rebuilt just as it had come from the Rogers Locomotive Works in 1898. According to Bruce Gerner, it was soon back in service on the same run with engineer Harry A. Dad Norton in charge, but bad luck seemed to follow the locomotive. Because during its 37 years of history, old 382 was involved in accidents that took 6 lives before it was retired in 1935. During its career, the 382 was renumbered 212, 2012, and 5012. And if you ask me, that's another karma thing. You never rename something that's, to something else that it was originally of. Otherwise, you're asking for. And today there are 3 museums that honor Casey Jones. The first is the historic Casey Jones Home and Railroad Museum in Jackson, Tennessee. Then there's the Walter Valley Casey Jones Railroad Museum in Walter Valley, Mississippi. And then the Casey Jones Railroad Museum State Park in Vaughn, Mississippi. And this museum had closed, unfortunately, in 2004. And with that, I shall wrap up the video. If you enjoyed the content today, please leave a like button. And also, If you've not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, as both liking and subscribing to the profile help my channel grow. And don't forget about the super thanks. Any amount contributed is greatly appreciated. And if you don't want to do it that way, visit our print shop at Nickel Plate Limited on Etsy.com. And we thank you once again.